You're listening to the Better Two podcast with DM Needham. Hi gang, Donna here. Thanks for tuning into the Better Two podcast. Today's guest is Taylor Roark. Taylor is an intuitive life coach, and he had an interesting journey to get there. We not only talk about intuition, we talk about dealing with our past and confronting our idea of who we are. And surprisingly enough, it starts when we're just a little infant. So stay tuned and check it out. This episode of the Better Two podcast is brought to you by Kitty Mystic and author of Love is Worth Waiting For, DM Needham. An afternoon at the pool changed Wes's life. When he saw Jen, he knew she was his always and forever. Most nights, Wes spent pursuing his dream of landing a record deal. With Jen looking up at him, he knew nothing would stop him. His dream was fast becoming a reality, until Mason Langford entered their world. While Wes was living his dream, he lost his heart. Now he wondered if he'd ever get her back. Available now, Love is Worth Waiting For by DM Needham at most booksellers. Hi, Taylor. How are you doing?
Very well, Dawn. Thanks. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. And where are you located?
Right now, I am in London, England, although you can probably tell from my accent that is not where I'm originally from, but that's my home for now.
So where are you originally from?
Well, I was born in California, but I grew up mainly in Richmond, Virginia. And I left the US about 20 years ago. Lived in Tokyo, I lived in France, and I've been here for the last 15 years. Yeah.
Well, you say you're not from there, but you do have that slight British hint to your voice.
I was back in the US for Christmas many years ago. I'd lived here for a few years. And I was saying words because I think by living someplace, you start to take on certain things. And I think in particular words, vocabulary is more than accent. And my sister, sisters like have sibling rivalry. And she would taunt me. And whenever I would say something, she would just kind of look at me with these, eyes and say, "We don't speak like that."
Well, I'm from New Orleans originally, and when I go back home, I do fall back into that New Orleans accent thing, which sounds a little like New York. Because most people, when I say I'm from New Orleans, are like, "You don't sound like you're from there." And I don't use the word y'all very often now. It's you guys because, yes, I've lived in the Midwest for 20-something years. So I understand.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when you go back, when you left, people were like, "You have an accent." When I left, people are like, "Oh, you sound like you're from New York." Okay, fine. So then when I go back home now, it's like, yeah, there is an accent there that I didn't remember, but you can definitely hear it when you're away.
Absolutely. And I do think that I adopt it a bit when I go back to sort of fit in a little something, or just, I think it's not so much to fit in. I think there's a familiarity and the sort of an ease to kind of like we're all putting on airs to some extent, and it's like, oh, I get to put on my sort of Richmond. I didn't have a strong Southern accent because I didn't live there for the first 8 years, and Richmond's not it's not New Orleans, it's not Alabama or South Carolina, and very strong. Particularly in Richmond. Other parts of Virginia are a stronger Southern accent, but yeah, it's fun to play with.
Well, the funny thing about New Orleans is you have New Orleans where it sounds like they're from New York, and then you go everywhere else in the state. And I lived in Shreveport for a while. And you have more of the Texas twang. I have the movies have always portrayed New Orleans accents, at least in the 80s, as that Southern Belle thing.
Yeah.
And I was always mortified. The only person I have ever met, I went to Washington, D.C. with a bunch of high schoolers, and we went with a delegation from Georgia. And out of the whole class, there was one girl that just had the Southern Belle thing down to an art.
Fantastic.
It was amazing. But yeah, when late at night, I do sometimes slip into it. And that goes back to what you said. There's this comfort and there's this ease to it. So you have lived in 3 different, you said 3 continents, and you've visited 50 different places. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I I you know I said I was born in California.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in November. My birthday was a few weeks ago, and in the first Christmas, my mom and I drove across country. So when I was whatever 6 weeks old, I was already traveling. We drove from Monterey, California, to St. Louis, Missouri,
Wow.
and when I was 6, 8 weeks old or whatever it was, and even as I was young, my mom was moving around a bit with my father, and then they were divorced, and so I was kind of up and down the East Coast, and living in lots of different places. So it was familiar to me and interesting to me. I think there was a sense, when we're younger, we do things for a particular reason, and that we may not uh, continue when we get older, or hopefully we can grow out of some of those.
Yeah.
And I definitely had a sense in my 20s, in particular, when I graduated from university, of wanting to go out and find myself, and I had this real like, well, it's not here, so it's got to be somewhere else, and let me move here, and then things will be exciting, and let me move to this other place, and then things will work out. And as they say, like, well, wherever you go, there you are. And so that wasn't really changing who I was internally, but I really enjoyed the thrill of being in different places, experiencing new things, and also I think I enjoyed the thrill, the challenge of having to make it someplace. I think I said I moved to Virginia when I was 8, and so I went to a relatively small school. It was quite a sort of cliquey school. I didn't really fit in, so it was like, okay, cool. How am I going to make it here by distinguishing myself? And that became a bit of a pattern. So I'm always very interested to visit different countries, visit different locations, just to see as much how I operate, and see how other people are, how they're different, how they're similar. It helps me see my own culture, connect with people in all sorts of different ways.
And when you're talking about the one thing and I totally agree with you, because I went from Shreveport, then I moved to Dallas, and then I moved to Indiana, and then I moved, and it's like you think, okay. And it started really when I moved in high school, because we moved from New Orleans to Shreveport, and that was complete culture shock. But I thought before we moved, I'm sitting there thinking, well, nobody's going to know me. It's going to be a different place. Everything's going to be better. But the one thing that nobody really thinks about is you're still you. You're still taking you with you. So unless you're really embracing changing who you are, everything that's bothered you where you're at is going to be following you.
And I think that got me into a lot of change, because I had a lot of struggle and angst and frustration with who I was, and many of us do, right? In teen years, we're trying to figure it out. Who are we? And I really took a lot of that to heart, and definitely kept that attitude, kept that quest into my 20s and 30s and onwards. But because, as you say, right, you're taking yourself with you, then you have to start to say, well, okay, so it's not Shreveport or New Orleans or Richmond or Tokyo or wherever you end up. The common denominator is me. So am I happy with myself? Are there things I would like to change about myself? And if so, what can I do to affect those changes?
Exactly. So that takes us kind of back to, you had a corporate job for 20 years, and corporate jobs can be quite exhausting, quite stressful, but you lasted 20 years in it. So,
well, I had a few different jobs. One of the things that, in the moving, I recognized that I liked to do different things. I like to visit different places and be different things. And yeah, I survived in the corporate world. Survived, funny word to use, and probably even thrived in the corporate world by doing different things and following what was important to me in different ways. And I went in, I dove into the deep end quite substantially in terms of the first real corporate job I had. I mean, I had some other jobs out of college and meandering about, and when I was studying before I went to law school. But the first real, full-time contract job I had was working as a corporate lawyer in New York. So I worked for a very large, very prestigious New York City law firm. And I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have gotten that position. I didn't go to the Harvards, Yales, Columbias. And it was exciting. Certainly there was a sense of me wanting to prove my ability, my worth, my accomplishment, my intellectual capability, and the excitement of living in a place like New York. And it was very exciting. And also I got to see very, very close what that world is like, and how that industry works. I mean, we were working on very large corporate transactions, mergers and big bankruptcies, and like the IPOs of the all that kind of .com mania from the late 90s and early 2000s. I was involved in all that and working on contracts, and so there was this intellectual stimulation that was incredibly rewarding, and to come out of putting so much effort into education and studying and then being rewarded with that was, I really, I'm grateful. And in that, I started to sense that it wasn't really fulfilling for me, that it wasn't filling up other aspects of myself, my emotional, my psychological, my spiritual, and some people were very happy to continue doing that, and they found those outlets in other ways, or they just determined that they were less important for them. For me, I had a sense of wanting to really integrate those, and so after about 5 years and the opportunity to live in New York, Tokyo, and then here in London, I decided to leave, and I actually had no idea. I mean, I say it's 20 years, but there were pockets of anywhere from 1 to 2 years where I really was sort of drifting at sea. I moved to France. I got married. I had no idea what I wanted to do. When I told the people at my law firm that I was leaving and I didn't know what I was going to do, most of them were horrified. And yet it was the true thing for me. I ended up eventually going back into corporate, but I was doing work in large-scale renewable energy projects and using my legal background. And we were working on really interesting, cool projects, and did that for another 5 years, and left one job, traveled around a bit, tried some different things, and then went back into corporate after my first attempt to kind of be self-sufficient and run my own company just didn't work. I just didn't make the money. I didn't have the contacts. I didn't have the confidence, or whatever it was. And I went back into the corporate world as a consultant, and did that for another 5 years, and then was laid off. The company was kind of downsizing. And that time, that's now been 4 years ago, I wanted to go out and really do my own thing. And I was a much more integrated person, and decided to go into personal and executive life coaching.
And see, that's the thing. You had to go on this journey of self-discovery. And there had to be times when you were incredibly scared that, you had no net, dare I say. You were out there, as you said, adrift. So how did you overcome that fear of what happens if I don't find a tangible place to land?
Well, I don't think in some ways, I don't know that I have actually overcome it, because I still have that fear, right? Okay. I mean, yes, my, life's going well, but if anybody who runs their own business knows that, you're always, it's never a certain, right? Unless you've got your stockpile that you've made your millions, billions, or trillions, whatever you need for you and your loved ones, anything can go wrong, and that's true for being in a business and company now as well. Much more so than it used to be, right? It used to be, well, if you had a job, you were secure. Um, I think for me, there was just this sense of being true to what was important. I really do consider myself blessed, and not that I didn't work hard for it, but I had this opportunity to work at a high level corporate job, and very well paid, right? Very well rewarded to be a corporate lawyer in New York. Like I was paid far more than I'd ever made before, and actually thought I was worth. But take the money.
Yeah.
And yet it wasn't the thing that when I thought for myself who I wanted to be, when I looked in the mirror and who I choose to be in this world, it wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't sustaining. And also, that world for me, and not everybody's like this. It took a lot of toll on me. So it took its toll on relationships. It took its toll on my physical and mental and emotional well-being. I didn't eat very well. You end up, because there's so much pressure, and it's imposed from an external thing. I was quasi-alcoholic, using other substances just to kind of get me from Monday morning to Friday evening, and then to get me from Friday evening to Monday morning, right? In one way or the other. And yes, there's an awareness of that. And there were times where I really was adrift, and maybe even still am, as I continue to build and create what my life, what my business is about. And there was maybe it goes to, I'm just trying to bring it to some of the stuff we've spoken about, the uncertainty of moving from one place to another. You start to get a sense, well, I do survive, maybe, and I've, slept in cars and not had enough money to pay rent, or eaten out of, noodle boxes or whatever it is. But I'm still here, right? And so it was kind of like, well, as long as I'm living, and as long as I've got my heart and my mind, well, even if I'm adrift, I'm going somewhere.
True. It's just sometimes people, when they get adrift, they don't know how to ever get out of the fear mode of it. I find myself in a situation now where it's like, I'm about to hit a year and a half since my husband passed. And it's like, okay, so the reality is there. There is always going to be a reality of this. This is not going to change. I know people are like, well, you've dealt with this for a year and a half, but it's like, now it's coming to more to roost. So there's still that drift of, so where am I going now? Because I'm ultimately going to most likely have to completely rip my life up, which is get rid of my house and change that. And we all want, and I know you were talking, if you sleep in a car, people have been homeless and they still have survived, but it's still that ultimate thing of, this is your security and you're about to lose your security. So how do you can walk away. That's easy, but there's still the nagging feeling afterwards of, am I making the right choice? I'm sure that had to come into your head a couple of times.
Oh yeah. I live, but I had that even when I had security. I lived a lot of my life in regret, and I think that that's just maybe what I grew up with, the circumstance that I grew up with. There was a lot of I love my mom to death, and I'm grateful for all that she gave to me. But probably the most prominent word that I heard growing up was should. You should do this. You should do this. You should do this. And I took all that on. So when from a very early age, I would do something and I would think, have I done the right thing? I should have done this. I should have done that. I should have done this other thing. And it was terribly debilitating. It also had its value in saying, well, let me look back. Could I have done anything different? Was there anything I could have changed in that? But to live from that was was very difficult for me, and so I wanted a sense of freedom from that. I can't speak to other people's circumstances, and know other people have dealt with far worse, tragedy that I have. Um, uh, I had a mentor who said something to me. I was talking about, my fears of particularly going into my own business. I think one of the things I realized when I started my coaching business, I felt quite confident in my ability to create this new business, and because I thought, well, I've traveled these many places, I've lived in this number of different countries and continents, and I've traveled. I've done manual work. I've worked on Wall Street. I've done this work, and I thought I've adapted to all these things. I'm clever. I can figure these things out. But the transition when I went from that corporate world to what I do now, which obviously running a business has that business dry sense to it, but the work I do one-on-one with clients is it's very heart-based. So I work as an intuitive coach, so I don't come to intuition like I wasn't seeing things clearly when I was 12 and having these visions. I was very straight and narrow and didn't think I had any of that ability, and I cultivated it. I created it, and now work with other people to do that as well. And that transition from head to heart was by far the biggest challenge I had, to really live from that, and still is. It's very easy for me to try to fall back and rely on a particular strength, which was, okay, I've got a good brain, I'm clever, but if it doesn't give me a sense of fulfillment and a sense of authentic expression for me, so what? So be it. There's something more to life. And I had a mentor when I was talking about this work, and I kind of said, well, what's the guarantee? I need a guarantee. I want to guarantee that what I go out and do, I'm going to succeed. And she said to me, there are no guarantees in life. You are your guarantee. And it really, like I'm getting kind of like goosebumps just saying, because I'm remembering how profound it was, and how much I needed to hear it at the time. But as I say it now, and in response to your question, I realized that on some level I had that understanding all along. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I don't think I would have taken many of the chances and risks and uncertainties that I did by saying, well, I'm just going to take a, whatever it was, $200,000 a year job and just throw it away and go figure some other stuff out. Right.
Your gut kind of knows. It's like, if you listen, you trust your gut, you're going to be okay. It's just your head starts, especially if you had the parent, as you were describing, the parent that has, well, you should have done this, you should do this. That's always there. And it's interesting that you bring this up, because I was talking to a friend a few minutes before we went on air, and she was talking about a friend who she worked with, who she complains about her job a lot. She works in a daycare. She complains about her job a lot. And she's like, the friend of the friend. And the fact is, so the friend of the friend is complaining about the job, and she's like, they took a walk, and my friend's like, well, the school's hiring here. You would be a great teacher. She's like, well, no, I don't know that I could be a teacher. And it's that whole fear factor of, if I make that change, what happens if I fail? But the fact of the matter is, you won't know unless you try. There's no guarantee, but if you try, you could soar.
Yeah. And, maybe you fail, and actually that's the best thing to happen. Mm-hmm. I had a podcast as well. And I spoke to, I had a few guests on who had gone through significant difficulty, and turns out I had two or three guests on who had an accident and ended up in wheelchairs. And I spoke to them about this, right? And it's like, well, what do you have regrets and da-da. And they were like, no, that's exactly what I needed to go through. I was like, I remember like being very humbled and really surprised, but at the awareness, the ability to come to that, right? But how that particular circumstance defined that person. And, it's not that they wanted that,
No.
but, we meet whatever we have. And, I do believe in this sort of, indomitable spirit of the heart. And I've always been, kind of pushing myself in that. So there was a part of me that really welcomed change, not the pain of it, right, or not the uncertainty, but so be it, right? That I because I work in intuition and transformation, it's like, well, when you get into the spiritual side of transformation and mythology, like I love mythology, and like Ovid's the Metamorphosis and all these things that, you have to go from where you were, and metamorphosis, transformation. You literally die to who you are today to become what you're going to be tomorrow. And of course there's uncertainty. Of course there's, risk and all that. And yeah, you may end up in a wheelchair. You may end up, bankrupt or in all sorts of things that, I don't wish those onto people or myself, but when they come, or if they come, is that what's going to define you? Right. Or do you have this opportunity to say, well, that's just a thing. That's just a circumstance.
Well, and see, some people can look at that and they can overcome. My mother, she had some issues, and I told her, look, you don't know what tomorrow is going to hold. And she took the easy way out. The fact of the matter is, you can sit here and you can face your challenges and trust your gut that no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. If I am still living and breathing, then I am okay. It may not be easy, but if I can, keep going, I'll be okay. And, going back to intuition, I think what happens is we are all born with it. I do not doubt that we all have it. But I think at a certain point, because of our environment that we are around, we are told not to trust it. You're supposed to trust what the teacher is saying. You're supposed to trust what your parents are saying. You're supposed to believe everything else. You're not supposed to trust your gut.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the society, the culture that we live in is, as you say, it's the authority knows. The teacher, the parent, the religion, and nothing wrong with those things. But we don't have structures in our, certainly in our American or Western society, really, that say, but what's best, and we're going to cultivate that, right? Because it's not like you just say it once and then, okay, cool, you're done, right? Because we have decades of another type of learning, of what's true, or what's reality, or what's assumed to be those things, and to be self-determined. Well, that's, first of all, that's not necessarily good for hierarchical power structures, and corporate power structures. I'm very grateful to have lived and worked in structures that really showed that to me. Okay, well, this is how they work. Okay, well, so what about what I think, and not to turn turn the apple cart or whatever, but to really see, it's like, well, how can we benefit? How can we support this structure? And if everything's kind of top down, well, how can you get learnings and lessons and input from bottom up? And there are lots of change management structures that are looking at that now, but it's not a traditional thing, and the authority based sort of societal structure is still the predominant one. So I'm fortunate that I was interested in and have sniffed out and found and received mentoring and tutoring and about how to cultivate that from people who are interested in being self-determined and what that how to do that, but also the responsibility of that. Yeah. Some people, I would say, like, it's convenient, and I can see this in myself. It's convenient to assume that other people have power over us because, well, then we don't really have to take on that for ourselves. We don't have, because if I go out and succeed, well, that's great. hey, look at me. But if I go out and fail, and then I have to say, well, that's me as well.
Working in insurance, the one thing I learned was nobody wanted to take responsibilities for their actions. That was the very first claim I had across my desk, because it was a parking lot accident. The man didn't clean off his back window, no snowing, and he backed into somebody, and he swore up and down he wasn't at fault. And I'm like, well, what happened? I looked to my left, and I looked to my right, and I backed up. Did you clean your window off? No. It's your fault. And going back to the hierarchy here, I mean, I can go back to a story that my mom used to tell me. She loved to tell people this, and I don't know why, but I think I was I think I was in kindergarten, and I had gone to preschool and stuff before in pre-kindergarten, and I wasn't doing my work, and it was a Catholic kindergarten. So I got called in, and in front of my mom, in front of the teacher, my mom said that the teacher asked me why I wasn't doing my work, and I said I couldn't help it if everybody else was stupid, which is bad, but this is a 5-year-old. So, and apparently, I got told you better do your work or whatever. But once again, here's that hierarchy of you need to step in line. You can't think for yourself. So we're started at a very young age that this is the way it needs to be. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have rules and we shouldn't learn right or wrong, but I think we also need to look at, in our schooling across the world, stress management, being in touch with our own feelings and our intuition, because I think we would have a lot less violent propensities and splitting up of people, being against each other so much, if we all knew how to handle things better.
Yeah. Well, and when you say that, I mean, one thing that comes to my mind, I was reading an article from somebody yesterday about this, because one of the things that comes up in transformation is looking at, to really being honest with that violent propensity in us, right? That and actually using that, right? That it's like we can have an idea to want to create something beautiful and from our heart, but we do have anger, we have aggression, we have resentment, and we have these things. And it's very useful in the work I do. I really bring that up, right? As this idea of shadow work, right? It's like you got to bring the shadow out, not to live from it, because so much, we look at, it's like, oh, well, that's bad, right? It's bad to have these things.
You need to be able to confront it. That way you can work through it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Just that. I mean, and to be able to name it, right? It's like, it only has power if we give it power, right? The monsters under the bed, when you get under and shine the light, they're not monsters anymore. If we keep them under the bed or in the closet or wherever it is, deep in the recesses of our unconscious, then of course they have power. I think it's in Revelations in the Bible that it said that the way that to defeat these pestilence and death and all these is like the demons of the world rise up and they are named. It's like when you name things, you take a power out of it. I was talking to somebody I had on, a teacher, and we were talking about this opportunity for kids, and she's a school teacher, and in the English language we have an unfortunate grammar structure, because we say I am angry, I am happy, I am sad, whereas in many other languages they say I have sadness, I have anger, right? But we're sort of limited. We define, it's like I am angry, and so what are you telling yourself? It's like, oh well, then you are defined as anger, right? You're not a limitless soul that happens to have an emotion or a vibration or an energy of anger or sadness or whatever it is passing through you. But we define ourselves as that. Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense when you think about it. I mean, you say I am worried. You don't say, there's some worries. It's I am. Well, why are you owning that? Why are we sitting there giving it that power? Because you are giving it power when you're saying I am.
Of course.
So how do you get your clients out of that mindset?
Well, I mean, one of the things I do is, I use higher against lower. The alchemists talk about using higher energy against lower energy. So we are everything, right? I mean, on some level, I don't know how woo woo you want to get, but we're all just energy. We're vibration. We're connected to everything through all time and space, right? Um, and So what is it? We have this opportunity to really connect with the fullness of our heart, right? And I believe that we're here for something. Mm-hmm. We're individually here for something, and Dawn has been incarnated at a particular time and place for a reason, and Taylor has as well, and so is everybody else, right? And we can get caught up. It's like, well, is that to buy this type of house and this many gadgets and to go on this many vacations, and that's it? Or is it something else? Is there something deeper and that we are each individually called to? So through a series of meditations and other things, I connect people to what it is that their hearts really want to express here and now, right? That may change tomorrow or a year from now, but here and now, there's something that my heart, that your heart wants to connect to. So first of all, let's be really honest about what it is that you want to create. Because most of the time, if I say to somebody, well, if I say, you truly want to be whatever, like a trapeze artist or a singer songwriter, somebody will say, yeah, but I can't do that. I don't have the training. I'm too old for that. I don't have enough money to take the classes for that. So I'm just going to forget about it. Well, let's put all that aside. Do you want that? Oh, yeah. I would love that. Okay, cool. Let's just start with that. Let's just start with what you would actually love. And then we start to look at, well, what's holding you back from that, right? Because really, we put excuses in front of us. We said, well, I'm too old. I'm too this. I don't have enough of that. But, you can point to a million different examples of people who didn't let circumstances determine what was possible for them. Right. I mean, look at the Helen Kellers, the Nelson Mandelas, there's so many different people who you could say, yeah, but here's this person. They didn't let circumstances determine. I have a friend who grew up in rural South Africa, on the streets, poor as dirt, and he wanted to be an artist, and he wanted to be an international artist. So he sold, he basically sold bread on the side of the road and made enough money over the years to get himself to the US and got a visa. And he's now an internationally recognized artist, like traveling at, sort of like making far more than I do. Right. Not that I've coached him, but, I know him and I know his story. Right. It's like, he could have just said, well, I'm just a poor person, living in apartheid Africa as a Black man. Like, I don't have choices. And he said, well, I know what I want to do. I'm going to go create this. And that's what he did. And the things that really hold us back, maybe there are circumstances, and we'll get into that. But in my estimation, the things that really hold us back are ourselves. I don't believe I'm capable of that. But really, the beliefs are even more fundamental. I don't believe I'm worthy of having the recognition. I don't believe I'm good enough to do that. I don't believe you can trust people. So I'm not going to put myself in those situations. And when you see that those beliefs are just something that you created, we created. You weren't born with people aren't born with a belief of, you can't trust people. They create that, they establish that through their circumstances, and their parents or their environments may have something to say. But when we become adults, we keep those beliefs. We assume that the beliefs that we have are actual reality.
It's the programming. It's the programming that we consistently heard that, sit down and be quiet. You're not supposed to say that. You're not going to do that. And it's funny because I watched a movie this week that actually there was a line in it that really stuck with me, and that was our past isn't chasing us, we're chasing our past. Yeah. And it's true, because the tape in our head that has all those that negative feedback, it's not chasing us. We've allowed it to take up residence there.
Well, and yeah, absolutely. And often we're trying to resolve the pain of the past. So something happened, there's no perfect parenting. So even imagine you had and not many of us have that, but imagine you had a beautiful mother and father who loved you dearly, and they provided everything for you and gave you everything you want. They weren't perfect parents. Impossible, right? And so at some point, at some time, the nurturing that you needed, the acknowledgement you desired was not met. And when it's not met, you're making decisions from certainly the time you're born, and probably in conception, maybe even before you're conceived, right, of what's possible for you. Anyway, but from the time you are in this physical form and living on your own, things are happening from the closest people around you, assuming it's a biological mother and father or whatever your caretakers are that got you to where you are. And as that's happening and you're not being met with the perfect love that each of us requires, we make decisions, we make beliefs of who we are. And it's pre-logic, it's pre-language. You don't wait till you're 7 and say, I know what I believe now. Yeah. You're making those decisions the entire time, and they're getting reinforced, right? So that and they're reinforcing themselves. And so we have these beliefs, and then we carry those beliefs into our adult life. So, the decisions we made when we were 6 months old or 5 years old, that's how we live our lives. We all of us, not just my clients, I'm like this. Everybody I know is like this. We make our decisions based on beliefs we created when we were children. I mean, that's insane. It's like we let a 2-year-old determine what's true for us, and then what we do now is we want to go back and fix what happened when we were 2. So we're going to take action now here in 2021 to fix what happened in for me in 1971.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is too, you, and I've said this to a couple of people, you also have to consider that, going back to the perfect parent, if you look at your parents, you have to look at your grandparents, because your grandparents aren't the same the people that your parents had. While your grandmother might be the cute, warm, fuzzy lady, your father or your mother may look at you, I don't know this woman. This is not the mother I had. And we don't look at those things because it doesn't, when your mom says that to you as a kid, you're just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. As an adult, though, you look at your parents as an adult and you're like, oh, it all makes sense. I understand why you're the way you are. And that gets passed through generations without even really, I don't think we realize that.
So, I mean, and one of the other things I do is I get people to focus on what they're going to create. Right, I'm interested in what you create for yourself, rather than resolving your identity or who you think you are, because we created an identity, and we're trying to fix that. Well, I don't, we don't have time machines, so you can't go back to the past to fix those things. So for me, they're just part of personality. They're a very thin sliver of what's possible for us. What I'm interested in is what people want to create. So whether it's a dream home, a dream relationship, a dream artistic expression, the things that I really believe that that expression, our creativity, and not creativity in just the limited idea like, oh, he's an artist or she's a painter, or that kind of, it's like what kind of relationship do you want to create? What kind of life do you want to create for yourself? Because we all, in my estimation, we all have the power and the opportunity to do that.
Well, this house I live in, I created because I said I wanted certain things. I said I wanted a brick mailbox with planters on the side. And when we looked at the house, that's exactly what it had. And I mean, I tell people, when you're trying to manifest things, don't sit there and say, I want an Escalade. Okay, so you want an Escalade. Guess what I got for you? I got you a 2007 busted up Escalade. Is that what you wanted?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be clear. And that's, going back to what I was talking about, a year and a half, it's like, for most of my life, I've always been able to look and go, okay, I see where my future's going. And for this part now, it's like, I know I'm a podcaster, I know I'm an author, but there's just this, I don't want to say a blankness of where am I going? I don't know, because something that had been in my life for 16 years, someone that had been there in my life, you're suddenly going, okay, so now where do you see yourself? And I'm sure you deal with that with your clients. If when they change jobs or a relationship ends, you're dealing with people that are suddenly, dare I say, drifting, even though I'm not fully drifting, but they're still adrift.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it takes time for that to become clear. It takes time for the muddy waters to kind of still, to determine what that is, right? So, and as I said as well, like it may progress or change over time, right? So, the first, and I mean, I don't know, but and I'm very sorry to hear about your loss, and this, and that's, there's no easy way out or path forward, right? But it's like, to start with, maybe a year and a half ago, it's like, I just want to feel loved, for instance. I don't know, and then it progresses, like, well, I want to feel belonging, or I want to feel this, and then how does that show up? It's like, well, does that mean I'm part of a singing group at the local hall or at the church, or is that I actually am interested in a new relationship, and how would that look, and what's true for me in that, right? Because then we have this opportunity to really say, well, what is it, right? Sometimes a choice, like you say, right, it's very clear. It's like, I see the planter, I see this exactly as it is, and I know people who have, I'm sure you do as well, right, who manifest things that it's like almost as they literally have painted.
I've done it.
Exactly, right? And then other times you create something that actually it doesn't quite become clear until it's halfway through it, or it's like, okay, it's about this. Oh, I had a sense it was this thing, but it's actually moving into this. I'm my podcast, like, it actually came from a sense of authentic expression, and so I was doing other things. I was actually, it came from the sense of being expressed and using my voice. And one of the first things I was doing was voiceover work, because I felt like, well, this is a way to be an expression. And I got equipment and was doing voiceover and narration, and relatively quickly I realized, well, this isn't my true authentic expression, because I'm reading somebody else's words and maybe I'm making some money from it. And then it actually became into podcasting. And actually I'm going through a process right now where that's transforming as well. And I know that I need time for the new thing to emerge. So I'm in a bit of a, we talked about it, that adrift. It's like that, talk about like the long dark night of the soul, right? We've got to go through some times of darkness and uncertainty for that new light to emerge.
Agreed. And I mean, honestly, my podcast came out because, as much I had the radio background, but the whole reason this took root was because I was a guest on somebody else's podcast. For years, people have told me you need to do one. And I was a guest on somebody's podcast. It was about fear. He had an amazing podcast because he did 365 days, a different person every day talking about their fear.
Wow.
And my fear was about losing my husband. And the one thing I said when we first got together was, it's better to love you and lose you than never love you at all. Because he was slightly sick when we first got together. And I loved him. He was a great guy. We were friends first. But that moment pushed me to do this.
Wow.
So, because I thought about it, it's like, everybody's got a better to moment, a moment that they can look back. And it doesn't mean that we have to have a whole conversation about that moment, but it's an open dialogue, because everybody has an experience they can look back and go, yeah, I'm glad I did that. Yeah, I screwed my life up royally, but guess what? I did it.
Yeah. I mean, and I, I think for me, like all of the things that I push, and there are things in my business now, like I'm going through a transition, and I can feel myself being called to go to the next step. And it's very alluring and enticing for me to say, oh, no, 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 I'm going to put that off. I'm not sure where that's going. And so I'll just stay here and I'll stay safe and just try to eke out this existence and hopefully just get a few more clients in doing this thing. But I also know that it's not going to serve me. Right. And so, it's for me, it's better to go for what I want.
Well, that's exactly. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'll just say that for me, it's better to go for what I want because I don't necessarily always know what that's going to do, but I feel alive, and it takes me to the being my own guarantee, really, really searching for what that means.
Well, what I was going to add to that is if you ignore that call, it's just going to keep calling you and it's just going to keep getting stronger until you finally do it. Because if it's really meant for you to do, it's not going to let you go.
Yeah. And it may not be this life. You may come back and you have to deal with it all over again, except you're wherever.
Yeah. Anyway. So, how do you feel about your when you started getting connected with your intuition? I mean, did you decide that, was it something that inspired you that you were like, wait a second, how did I know that? Or was it just something that after travels that you connected with?
I think I mentioned this mentor, a woman who used to come to the UK and run workshops. And she was a healer and intuitive and an amazing woman. And without sort of training, she taught intuition. Her work was very healing. And she really offered me an opportunity to really look at myself. And I think that intuition for me, like, we kind of think intuition is this mystical thing that, some people have it and other people don't, but as you were saying, everybody has it. We don't really have the means to connect with it. And, if you break it down, like, you go to school and you pay for tuition. Well, intuition is just that inner knowledge, our inner knowing, right? And it shows up in all sorts of ways. I mean, sometimes it's this premonition of like, oh, don't turn down that street. And we find out later, oh, there was a car accident there and what would have happened if, and blah, blah, blah. And we think, oh, that's really weird and spooky. And other times it's just like, wow, I went to a job interview and the person offered me the job, but there was something about that person. I just don't really, it'd be higher pay, but something, and you decide not to take the job. And you find out later, it's like, oh, that person's a really horrible boss, or, they're convicted for fraud or whatever. And so there's this sense of just getting a sense of like, well, I don't know the things I know, but, I could, look at a million different examples. Well, why did I decide to move from this city to this city? Why did I decide to apply for this job or ask this person out on a date or, whatever it is? And in those seminars and workshops, there was a lot of this person really gave me a lot of opportunity to reflect on who I was, how my responsibility, how am I occurring? What am I doing to create this situation? I had just come out of a very painful divorce, and it was very easy for me to blame the other person, and yet I wasn't any happier for it. Yeah. Right. And so I started to look at, say, well, what is it I know? And did I have awareness of this? And actually, did I need to learn this? And, all these other questions. And it got me just more into a sense, that sense of like being my own guarantee. And then about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I was sort of going through various aspects of spiritual development, and I came across something here in London. It was a free sort of half-day training, and then from that there were other workshops, and I went along. And the person who presented in this half-day training, I didn't like at all. I was like, I don't like this person. And he sold me, well, come along to our 2-day, 3-day, blah blah blah. It's this much money. I was like, it wasn't even the money. I just said, I don't like this person. Yeah. I don't like his style. I don't like his attitude. I don't like anything about it. And yet there's something about what he's saying that I feel like I need to explore. And so I went back and did more work and workshops, and there was a structure to connecting with intuition. And so I was in groups of people that I'd never met before, and we were doing intuitive readings on each other and looking at sort of the, these dual aspects of us, our divine genius, super conscious, connected everything through all time and space side to us, and our human, egoic, limited, side to us, and getting insight and readings from people who had never met me before, so who knew nothing about me. They hadn't gone into my wallet or read my emails or anything. They were just speaking, and the accuracy of what I was receiving from people, and also what I was giving to people. We would be in groups of 3 or 4, and so everybody would sort of be read, and everybody would do readings, and hearing things that sometimes are very, very challenging. To hear people who've never met you call out the most intimate limitation that you have is challenging, and what is it, like de-armoring, or kind of and disarming, and yet it was also very empowering. So I stayed with it, right, and I worked more, and worked with people, and did coaching, and did more trainings, and just stayed with it, right, and then started getting a coach myself, and seeing results. It was like I've done things, right, and had a successful career or job. So when I saw results from coaching or trainings, where all of a sudden now it wasn't just my ability to make money at a job, but my ability to have fulfilling a relationship, to have healthy living, to manifest travel, and all these other forms of expression in myself, it was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, let me stay with, like, why wouldn't I stay with this? Yeah. Right. It's like, I'm happier, more fulfilled, richer in all these ways, and have great friendships and wonderful experiences in life. So yeah, let me have some more of that.
Yeah. I mean, when I took my intuition class, finally, I had always had hits, but it started getting to a point where it was like, you need to really connect. And I mean, I would be, the song comes on the radio that you just thought of, the friend that calls. And yes, I had one of those moments where I was flying down the freeway going about 70, and I was getting ready to round a bend, and the voice inside my head said, slow down. And I did. And traffic was at a dead stop. So I would have gotten into a gnarly accident. So It's like, you have to listen to that gut. And sometimes we don't. Sometimes we will go, oh no. And then afterwards you're like, why didn't I do that? And that's, that's our mind going, you're worried about nothing. But if you really trust yourself, then you can avoid those things in most cases. But even if you don't listen and you get a lesson out of it, it's a lesson that you needed to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. We have the opportunity to look at it like that, right? That, I have an assumption that everything is working out, in my highest interest. Not even that it's like working out perfectly, right? Because that could mean, I had a situation. Here in London, I rented an apartment that I ended up buying, renovated it, put a lot of money into it, and lived in it for less than a year. And just 2 months ago, the place completely flooded and it's completely destroyed.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. And I'm not crazy about it.
No, I imagine not.
not my preferred outcome. I look at the amount of like time and money and energy, and I ended up basically project managing the entire first renovation for a number of reasons. But really, the time and money and the energy that I put into it, it felt like such a labor of love. And literally to have something that just washes it completely out was fascinating, right? And and yet I remember looking at it and saying, okay, I don't know how, but I'm going to assume that this is here for a reason, that it's actually serving my next progression, my next development, where I can be. So, okay, that's now it becomes a bit of a game. It's like, well, let me kind of find the pieces of that puzzle. And I've still got, I was on the phone this afternoon talking to the people about the insurance, and is the insurance going to pay? How much am I going to have to pay? Right. What's going to happen? How long is it going to take? I'm in a temporary accommodation right now. So all my stuff is kind of all over. So there's all this uncertainty around it. Right. Mm-hmm. And certainly 5 years ago, and probably even 5 months ago, maybe I would have been in a very different place. I would have been in the emotion of it and seen myself as a victim of circumstances, right? Because it was the building, it was a blockage in a building, it was a big, tall apartment building, and it was blockage in a building water pipe that caused this, right? So, it'd be very easy for me to say, well, you see, this always happens in my life. And of course, there's a part of me that wants to do that. But I also am very open to saying, cool, it's just a set of circumstances. So what do I do with this? How do I use this? And is this calling for me to do something else or be something else or learn something else? And if so, what?
It could be your calling that, while it was part of your passion at the time, maybe you're supposed to build it even bigger, make it more of a home for you than you even thought it was.
Yeah. Or maybe the opposite, that it's now time to let that go.
True. I mean, that's the thing. It's like you have to sit with it and ruminate with it and figure it out, I mean,
and that's becoming clearer to me. It's like whatever the first emotion was, it's like, okay, now I'm letting that progress, develop to, it's like I used to do photography when we had like film. Now we have digital cameras, but and you've got to put the piece of photographic paper into the developer, and you start to see, like, the older movies where the picture starts to coalesce, right? It's like, here, like we have that with the old Kodak, right? Here's the thing, right? It may take a little time for that to come out. And when it does, then you have the definition. Okay, that's what this is.
And that's a very good analogy, because really that is life. You never fully see what it is until it's right there in front of you. Because even the illusion of an image that we may think we want, it may not be the perfect thing. So I appreciate your time. You do have a website called The Gallant Life. Is that correct?
Yeah, Gallant. So that's all right. My business, Gallant Trainings, and the website is gallant.life, GALLIANT.life.
And what will people find there?
Well, I can't remember what's on there right now. I mean, it gives an introduction to what I do, and really the adventure of self-discovery and self-expression. So I guide individuals in that. I'm particularly interested in men's work, and leading groups of men to what I call creative masculinity. So using masculine energy, but in a creative way. And I also work with organizations, corporate environments, in group settings as well. There's blogs and links to podcasts and some other things on there, but yeah, basically it's just it's sort of a holding space for what my business does, and people can get in touch. I've got a mailing list to send newsletters out and info about the trainings that I do, or just random information and stories about my life.
There is one thing, I guess, that this leads to another question. And how have you dealt with the change of toxic masculinity being called out now?
Yeah. Well, I think in a way, I think it's useful. I'm privileged in a way because I grew up as a white male in Western society. Now that may sort of be a limitation for me. But I always saw like who you are as much deeper than what you are on the outside, right? So there are plenty of toxicity is not specific to men or masculine energy. It certainly has, the society we have has a preponderance of that, but in a way, it's just a starting point. So what is it that you want to be? So I'm very interested in energy, masculine and feminine energy. I think we inhabit both, we all have aspects of both. Yeah, there's toxic feminine energy as well, right? It's maybe not as talked about as much. So I'm interested in the totality. I said, like, if you just because you have toxic energy doesn't mean you can't transform it, right? We all have ain't none of us perfect, right? So we've all done bad things to people in our lives, mean things, right? And that's a starting point, right? Because it's like, whatever you were, what are you choosing to be? And I do think that the world we live in, we talked about, like, anybody, certainly in Western society, isn't taught or shown how to live for themselves and make their own decisions. And certainly men are not, or boys are not, taught how to be men. And I would say girls are probably not taught how to be women either. Although, in what I would say is, there is something about the biological experience of a girl becoming a woman that something has to be dealt with. Somebody, now I know there's a lot of shame that goes into that, and sometimes it's sort of swept under the carpet, but somebody has to say, this is why you are going through a bleeding experience on a monthly basis.
Nah.
Well, okay.
my mom, I mean, to be blunt, my mother handed me, which was out of date at the time, a Kotex belt.
Right.
She didn't explain why this was happening or anything, right. And the belt wasn't even useful. So, I mean, now we have a little bit better thing. And to touch on something you said, yes, toxic feminine energy. And this is something that happened in second grade. We had a teacher call us in and say, look, all boys are dogs and all girls are cats. And you guys are tearing each other up because you're catty. I wasn't in this clique, but everybody got called in. So it's like, you need to not be so mean to each other. So while people sit there and put a man on a cross saying toxic masculinity is atrocious, which the whole boys will be boys thing is just bad. But girls can be just as brutal. And how many times have you now seen girls having major fistfights? Yeah. And I agree wholeheartedly that we both share masculine and feminine energy. I don't know why people are just like, well, I'm not a masculine person. Well, no, but you have that energy in you. And if you embrace it. Yeah. Same thing with a guy embracing feminine.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm very interested in integrating all of that. And I think there's real value in doing that in group settings. I mean, I do work one-to-one with people, but I've been in men's circles. I've done men's work in other venues or modalities, and really appreciate it. And I'm interested in particularly bringing that with the creative orientation I'm talking about. It's like, well, what is it you want to create, and connecting to your heart with that.
And that's important. I think if we can be more heart-based as a society, things would be just a little bit easier, just a little bit. So
certainly be funner and more fulfilling.
This is true. This is very true. Well, I thank you for your time. It's been an interesting conversation.
Thank you so much.
The conversation with Taylor was pretty interesting, as always. I like my guests. They're fascinating to me. And I think intuition, as I've talked to many of my clients in the past, intuition, everybody has it. It's just whether we choose to listen to it or not. So, when you're sitting there and you're making a big decision, maybe, like I was saying, you can't necessarily see it. You can't fully see the picture because you're going through a lot of stuff right now at that moment. Sometimes you just have to take a deep breath, pause for a second, and really see where you need to go. Where do you feel like you need to go? What do you see? And depending on where you're at, try to get out of the fear if you're in fear. And if you're not in fear, then try to see what is the worst thing that's going to happen. You may fly, you may succeed. And if you fail, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep going. Because as long as you have breath in your lungs and, you know, a heart still beating, you have to keep trying, because not everybody is fortunate to have this day or any day, because they're gone. So live your life to the fullest as best you can. As always, thank you for tuning into the Better To podcast. If you like the show, please leave a comment. You can leave a review on Podchaser, Apple, or you can send me a message at Donna at the better2podcast.com. That's DAUNA at better2podcast.com. And we do have a website, which is www.better2podcast.com, where you can catch up on all the episodes if you've missed any. We also have a Patreon page. And any way you want to support the show, it's great. If you want to just send me an email, that's fine. And if you want to be a guest on the show, please reach out as well. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a great day. And I'll catch you next time. Bye.